The orc girl farted next to him. Her mother said, "She's proposing to you." Colton Mercer had hidden from bounty hunters in many shameful places, but never inside the cracked ribcage of a dead canyon beast. Moonlight spilled over Marrow Gulch like cold milk, silvering the bones, the broken rail tracks, and the bloodhounds sniffing through the dust below. He held his breath as iron lanterns swung closer. Then something dropped from the cliff above. A green-skinned orc girl landed beside him without a sound, her bone dagger kissing his throat. Her golden eyes narrowed. Colton thought she would kill him. Instead, she glanced at the approaching hounds, stepped boldly beside him, and released the loudest, most humiliating fart he had ever heard. Before he could even gasp, an older orc woman emerged from the shadows, smiling proudly. "Well, human," she said, "she's proposing to you." By sunrise, Marrow Gulch looked less like a canyon and more like the open mouth of a dead world. Colton Mercer stood on a ridge of orange stone with his coat snapping in the dry wind, one hand holding his survey book, the other shielding his eyes from the white glare. Below him, broken rail tracks twisted through the canyon floor like old black veins. Half-buried train cars leaned in the sand. Telegraph poles stood crooked and silent. Every few minutes the wind dragged a long metallic groan from the abandoned bridges, making the whole gulch sound as if it was still remembering the war that had ruined it. Colton was not a soldier, not a hunter, and certainly not brave by profession. He was a relic surveyor, the kind of man people hired when they needed old tunnels mapped, dead cities entered, or forbidden ruins measured without asking too many questions. His boots were cracked, his hands were ink-stained, and his satchel carried more pencils than bullets. The people of Mercy Junction called him useful, which in the frontier was sometimes better than being loved. Mercy Junction was dying. Its wells had turned bitter, its crops had shriveled. Children woke with dust on their lips. Every evening, the town gathered around the last water tower and listened to it creak emptier than the day before. That was why Colton had come to Marrow Gulch. Old maps whispered of an underground water chamber beneath the canyon, sealed away before the Ironrail Empire turned the west into smoke and hunger. If he found it, Mercy Junction might survive the summer. If he failed, the town would become another ghost settlement swallowed by sand. But Marrow Gulch belonged to old fears. Empire posters nailed across Mercy Junction showed orcs with burning eyes and blood on their tusks. They called them tunnel beasts, raiders, plague carriers. Colton had grown up hearing that if you followed green lanterns under the earth, orcs would take your name and feed your bones to their children. He had never believed all of it, but fear had a way of living in a man even after reason moved out. Near noon, while measuring a collapsed rail shaft, Colton heard something beneath the stone. Not machinery, not wind, drums, low, steady, almost like a heartbeat. He followed the sound through a crack hidden behind hanging roots and rusted iron. The air changed at once. The canyon heat vanished. Cool dampness touched his face. His lantern flame bent sideways as if breathing. The passage sloped down into blue-green darkness, where glowing fungus clung to the walls, like stars trapped underground. Then the tunnel opened. Colton forgot to breathe. Beneath Marrow Gulch was a hidden orc settlement built into the bones of the earth. Stone bridges crossed black water pools. Lanterns made from polished horns swung over narrow walkways. Children with small tusks chased each other between mushroom gardens, while elders painted white symbols on bone pillars. Somewhere deeper inside, voices rose in rough, beautiful throat song, vibrating through the rock until Colton felt it in his teeth. This was not a den of monsters. It was a home. He took out his survey book with trembling hands and began sketching the tunnels, the water channels, the carved pillars. That was his mistake. A shadow moved behind him. Before Colton could turn, a hand like warm iron slammed him against the stone wall. A bone dagger flashed under his chin. The orc girl from the canyon stared into his face, her green skin bright in the fungus glow, her golden eyes furious. "Paper trapper," she hissed. Colton swallowed carefully. "Mapmaker. Same disease, I came for water," her lip curled, showing one sharp tusk. "Humans always come for survival and leave with someone else's home." Before he could answer, the drum stopped. The whole settlement turned toward him. From the central bridge, an older orc woman stepped forward, broad-shouldered, grey-braided, and wrapped in a cloak of stitched hide. Her eyes moved from Colton's frightened face to the black metal compass hanging at his chest. The orc girl saw it too. For the first time, her anger flickered into something almost like fear. The elder smiled slowly. "Well now," she said, while the underground lanterns creaked in the silence, "that little human has brought back a marriage compass." Colton Mercer learned very quickly that orc prisons did not need iron bars. They gave him a sleeping mat beside a warm stone wall, a bowl of bitter root stew, and one rule: if he stepped beyond the painted white circle without permission, Briar Ashbell would break both his knees and drag him back by his coat collar. Briar seemed very willing to perform this duty. She sat across from him in the blue-green glow of the fungus lamps, sharpening her bone dagger with slow, angry strokes. Around them, the hidden settlement carried on with cautious life. Children whispered behind carved pillars. Elders watched from rope bridges. Somewhere in the deeper tunnels, water dripped steadily into a black pool, each drop echoing like a tiny bell. The air smelled of moss, smoke, cooked roots, and old stone. Colton tried not to stare at anyone. That proved difficult. Everything beneath Marrow Gulch contradicted every Empire poster he had ever seen. Orc mothers braided their children's hair with beads. Old warriors limped past with carved walking sticks. Young hunters returned, carrying baskets of glowing mushrooms instead of severed heads. This was not a monster den. It was a town hiding inside the earth, afraid of the same empire that claimed to be protecting humans from it. Briar noticed his gaze and snorted. "Disappointed we don't eat skulls for breakfast?" "I was actually wondering how your water wheel works," Colton said. Her eyes narrowed. "You are the strangest prisoner we have ever had." The water wheel became his first chance. A tunnel tremor had cracked one of the wooden gears that carried water from a lower spring into the fungus gardens. Without it, half the gardens would dry within days. Colton asked to see it, mostly because sitting under Briar's glare was beginning to feel more dangerous than machinery. Mabel Ashbell allowed it, though only after ordering 3 warriors to stand nearby with spears. The wheel groaned in a narrow chamber full of mist. Dim amber lanterns hung from hooks. Water rushed below, black and cold, turning the damaged spokes with a wounded rhythm. Colton crouched beside the broken gear, listening to the catch and scrape of wood against stone. "You listen like it talks," Briar muttered. "Machines complain before they die," Colton said. "You just have to know the accent." For the first time, Briar almost smiled. Almost. He worked for hours, hands slick with oil and mineral water, using spare rail pins from his satchel to brace the split gear. Briar held the lantern, still suspicious, but she stopped insulting him after the wheel began to turn smoothly again. The sound changed from a painful grind to a steady rush, and water spilled through the garden pipes with cheerful little claps. The watching orcs murmured. Colton lowered his tools, exhausted. "There, it should last until you can carve a new gear." Briar looked at the flowing water, then at him. "You fixed it. I said I would. Humans say many things. Some of us even mean them." Before she could answer, the tunnel shook. A deep boom rolled through the stone, so powerful that dust burst from the ceiling. Lanterns swung wildly. Somewhere above, rock cracked like thunder. The settlement erupted into shouts. A child screamed. Colton saw a small orc boy trapped beyond a narrowing gap where stones were collapsing from the archway. No one else could reach him in time. Briar lunged forward, but the passage was too tight for her broad shoulders. Colton moved before fear could stop him. He dropped flat, crawled through the gap, and felt sharp rock scrape his back. The boy was sobbing beside a fallen pillar, clutching a wooden toy train. Colton grabbed him under one arm and shoved him toward the opening as the ceiling split above them. "Pull him!" Colton shouted. Briar dragged the boy free. Then the passage groaned. Colton tried to crawl after him, but his coat snagged on broken stone. Dust filled his mouth. The world became noise, pressure, darkness. A green hand shot through the gap. Briar seized his wrist. "Move, paper trapper!" She pulled with brutal strength. Colton tore free, just as the tunnel collapsed behind him, stones exploding into the space where his legs had been. For a moment, he lay on his back, coughing, while the settlement fell silent around him. The rescued child clung to Briar's side, crying into her hip. Briar stared down at Colton, breathing hard. Her golden eyes had changed. The hatred was not gone, but something had cracked beside it. Later during the clan meal, Colton was allowed to sit outside the painted circle. Unfortunately, he sat on the wrong stone. The entire cavern went silent. Briar's face turned a deeper green. Mabel Ashbell slowly covered her mouth, as if hiding a smile. Colton looked around. What did I do? Briar stood sharply, stepped beside him, and made a desperate, strange sound of warning in her throat. Then, to Colton's absolute horror, she released another loud fart beside his shoulder. The orc children gasped. The elders leaned forward. Mabel's eyes shone with wicked pride. Colton whispered, "Please tell me that means danger." Mabel laughed softly. "Oh, it does. Just not the kind you think." Briar Ashbell denied the proposal so fiercely that even the youngest orc children stopped laughing. "It was not a proposal," she snapped, standing in the middle of the feast cavern with her fists clenched and her tusks shining in the amber lantern light. It was a warning signal. Mabel Ashbell sat beside the fire pit, calm as a stone queen, stirring a pot of blackroot stew. A warning signal beside a sacred choosing stone. Briar's ears darkened. He sat there by accident, and you answered by accident. Colton Mercer wished the earth would open beneath him again. Dozens of orc faces stared at him from around the cavern. The place had gone so quiet he could hear stew bubbling, water dripping from the ceiling, and his own nervous swallow. The old bone charms hanging from the roof clicked softly in the warm underground draft. "I don't want to interrupt family lore," Colton said carefully, "but I would very much like to understand why everyone is staring at me like I just married a thunderstorm." A few orc children giggled. Briar pointed at him without looking. "He understands nothing. That proves it means nothing." Mabel's eyes remained gentle, but her voice carried through the cavern. In the old Ashbell custom, a warrior daughter did not choose with flowers, rings, or sweet poems. She chose by standing beside someone without hiding her body's truth. Breath, scent, weakness, shame, hunger, fear, all shared. It meant, "I trust you close enough to survive my worst moment." Colton slowly turned toward Briar. Briar looked ready to murder the stew pot. "But," Mabel continued, "the custom has not been used in 3 generations. Not since the Breathline began to fade." At that word, the older orcs lowered their eyes. The cavern seemed to cool. Another tremor rolled faintly through the stone beneath them. The hanging charms clicked harder. A ripple crossed the dark water channel beside the feast hall. Though no one had touched it, Briar's anger vanished for half a heartbeat, Colton noticed. Later, after the feast, Mabel sent Colton and Briar into the lower tunnels to inspect the cracked water channels. Briar objected loudly. Mabel ignored her, which Colton suspected was a mother's most ancient power. They descended past the mushroom gardens into older stone, where the walls changed from carved homes to forgotten ruins. The air grew damp and metallic. The lantern cast long shadows across murals of orc women standing before a vast sleeping shape beneath the earth. The murals were faded, but one symbol repeated again and again. A spiral drawn over an open mouth. "What is that?" Colton asked. "Old fear," Briar said. "That is not an answer. It is the only answer that has kept us alive." The tunnel shook again, harder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling in silver sheets. Somewhere far below, something exhaled. The sound was enormous. It moved through the passage like warm wind from a giant throat. Colton felt it push against his chest. His lantern flame flattened blue. For one terrifying second he heard not words exactly, but the shape of hunger inside the stone. Briar grabbed his arm. "You heard it," she whispered. Colton stared at her. "Heard what?" Her grip tightened. "Do not lie." The tremor passed, leaving the tunnels dripping and silent. Briar released him and walked ahead faster, but her shoulders had lost their certainty. Colton followed, his boots splashing through shallow water. "I hear things underground sometimes," he said after a while. "Ever since I was a boy." Briar did not turn. "That is why you became a tunnel rat?" "My father was the tunnel rat." Colton's voice softened. "He mapped old storm drains under Mercy Junction. One day he went below during a flood and never came back. Everyone said the dark took him. I started mapping because I thought if I drew every passage clearly enough, no one else would disappear." Briar slowed. The lantern light touched the side of her face, softening the hard line of her jaw. "My mother says maps are promises," Colton added. "I think they are apologies." For a long moment, Briar said nothing. Only water spoke between them, dripping steadily into cracks. Then she said, "I hate old customs because they make your life belong to dead people." Colton looked at her. Briar's voice lowered. My blood is not ordinary Ashbell blood. My grandmother had it, her mother before her. They called it the Breathline. When the thing beneath the canyon stirs, our bodies can calm it. Voice, scent, heartbeat, breath, all of it becomes part of the seal. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Colton stopped. An ancient stone door stood at the far end, taller than any church tower in Mercy Junction. Black metal ribs crossed it like the cage of some buried giant. Warm air pulsed through narrow cracks. With each pulse came a deep, wet rumble that made Colton's bones ache. Briar stared at the door, as if looking at her own grave. That thing sleeps because women in my family kept it sleeping, she said. And I am the last one. Colton's mouth went dry. The last? Briar nodded. If the seal breaks, I'm supposed to go down there alone. The words settled between them. Heavier than stone. Before Colton could answer, a distant sound rose from the tunnels above. Not a tremor, engines, iron wheels, men shouting. Then came the thin, eager howls of bloodhounds. Briar lifted her dagger. Colton felt the old compass at his chest begin to vibrate. Far above them, Grady Voss and the Ironrail bounty hunters had entered Marrow Gulch. With them came drill carts, lantern rifles, chains, and a woman Colton knew too well, Vera Pike, his former partner. The only engineer alive who could wake a dead machine and call it progress. The stone door breathed again. This time, Colton heard the hunger clearly, and somehow deep inside that impossible sound, it knew his name. The raid began with red light. It bled through the upper tunnels before the first scream came, flashing against the wet stone in sharp, violent bursts. Then the lantern rifles cracked. The sound tore through the hidden settlement like breaking sky. Children cried. Warriors roared. Bone charms rattled from the ceiling as smoke rolled low across the bridges. Colton and Briar raced upward from the seal chamber, boots splashing through shallow water, breath burning in their throats. Every tunnel seemed changed now. The blue-green fungus glow was swallowed by drifting smoke. The warm smell of stew and moss had been replaced by gunpowder, hot iron, and frightened bodies. Briar moved like a blade through the chaos. She shoved Colton behind a stone pillar, just as a rifle shot sparked against the wall where his head had been. On the bridge ahead, Ironrail bounty men in black dust coats dragged two orc elders in chains. Their bloodhounds snapped and howled, noses wet, ribs showing beneath scarred hides. At their center stood Grady Voss, tall and smiling under a wide-brimmed hat, his lantern rifle resting easy against his shoulder. "Well," Grady called, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Looks like the maps were honest after all." Colton's stomach dropped. Beside Grady stood Vera Pike in a soot-gray engineer's coat, brass goggles pushed onto her forehead. She held Colton's copied survey notes in one hand and a black metal ignition key in the other. "Vera," Colton whispered. Briar turned on him slowly. The hurt in her golden eyes struck harder than any blade. "You led them here." "No," Colton said, though even he heard how weak it sounded. "I didn't know." Vera's face tightened, but she did not look ashamed. "You always were good at finding doors." "Colt, I only made sure you were paid to find the right one." A terrible silence opened between him and Briar. Then Grady yanked Mabel Ashbell forward in chains. The old matriarch's grey braid was loose. Blood darkened her temple, but her back remained straight. Two bounty men held her arms. One had already lost 3 fingers for trying. Briar's rage cracked through the cavern. "Mother!" Mabel lifted her chin. "Stay where you are, girl." The hidden settlement trembled again, deeper than before. Far below, the sealed door answered with a groan so huge that dust fell like ash. The water channels rippled. Lantern flames bent toward the floor. Grady laughed nervously. "That better be the machine waking." "It is not a machine," Mabel said. Vera stepped forward. "It is an ancient power system built into a biological containment shell. Dangerous, yes, but controllable." Mabel looked at her with pity. "Humans always rename monsters before feeding them." The words chilled the cavern. Then Mabel turned her eyes to Colton. The proposal was not a joke. "Human." Briar went still. Mabel's voice carried over the smoke. "The hounds, the crying children, and the distant breathing under the earth." When Briar stood beside you and gave the old scent vow, she opened the first gate of the Ashbell bond. Not romance, not ownership, survival. The seal heard her choose someone to share breath with. Colton felt the black metal compass against his chest grow warm. Briar's face twisted with humiliation. "Mother, stop." But Mabel did not stop. She is the last living seal-bearer of Marrow Gulch. Her bloodline alone can calm the Hollow-Bellied One. But the old law allowed a second breath, a chosen witness, to carry half the terror so the bearer would not die alone. The cavern seemed to shrink around Colton. He looked at Briar, truly looked at her, and understood why she had hated the laughter. What had seemed crude and ridiculous to him was sacred to her people, dangerous to her body, and tied to a fate she had never asked for. Briar whispered, "I did not choose him." Mabel's eyes softened. "Then why can he hear it?" At that exact moment, every torch went out. A blast of hot air surged from the lower tunnels, carrying a sound like a giant stomach growling beneath the world. The hounds whimpered and collapsed. The bounty hunters stumbled back. Even Grady stopped smiling. In the darkness, the Hollow-Bellied One exhaled, and from deep under Marrow Gulch, it whispered Colton's name. The darkness lasted only a few seconds, but in those seconds, Colton Mercer felt the entire canyon breathe around him. The walls expanded with heat. The water channels trembled. Somewhere far below, the Hollow-Bellied One shifted in its buried sleep, and the sound of it rolled through Marrow Gulch like hunger dragging chains across stone. Then Vera Pike slammed her ignition key into the black metal control pillar. Blue-white light exploded through the cavern. Ancient ribs of metal unfolded from the walls. Dead rail lines sparked awake. The lower tunnels answered with a roar so deep it knocked men from their feet. Vera stared at the rising machine with wild triumph shining behind her goggles. "Do you see?" she shouted over the thunder. "This could power every settlement from Mercy Junction to the coast." Mabel's still chains spat blood onto the stone. "It will burn them first." Grady Voss grabbed Colton by the coat and shoved a pistol under his jaw. "Enough. You have your water map. Walk out with us, Surveyor. Humans choose humans." Across the bridge, Briar stood beneath the violent blue light, dagger in hand, smoke curling around her green skin. Her face was proud, furious, and wounded all at once. Colton saw the truth in her eyes. She was ready to go below alone, ready to become another Ashbell woman, swallowed by duty while everyone else survived above her. His father had vanished in darkness. Briar was about to do the same. Colton looked at the water map in his satchel. Mercy Junction needed it. His people needed it. But the orc children crying behind the pillars needed their home too. The canyon was not asking him to choose between human and orc. It was asking whether survival meant stealing life from someone else. He slowly pushed Grady's pistol away. "No," Colton said. Grady blinked. "No! I'm done mapping graves for men like you." Grady swung the pistol, but Briar moved first. Her dagger flashed through the blue light and struck the weapon from his hand. The shot fired into the ceiling. Stone shattered. Chaos erupted. Mabel roared and drove her chained shoulder into one bounty hunter, knocking him over the bridge rail. Orc warriors surged from smoke-filled side tunnels. Bloodhounds scattered, whining as the machine's scream grew sharper. Colton ran to Briar. She stared at him as if she did not know whether to hit him or trust him. "I accept," he said. Breathless, her eyes narrowed. "You do not even know what you are accepting. I know you should not have to die alone." For one heartbeat, the whole battle seemed to fall away. Briar's anger cracked. Beneath it was fear, raw, young, and carefully hidden. Then she seized the black metal compass at his chest and pressed it against the clan mark burned into her palm. "Then breathe when I breathe," she said. "And do not shame me by fainting." They descended into the lower chamber together while the settlement fought above. The passage burned with copper-green light. The floor pulsed under their boots, not like stone anymore, but like the skin of some sleeping giant. Every drip of water sounded enormous. Every breath came back doubled from the walls. At the center of the chamber, the sealed door had split open, revealing a vast darkness lined with wet black metal and ancient bone. Briar began to sing. It was not beautiful in a human way. It was rough, low, trembling with generations of fear. Colton matched her breathing as best he could. The compass grew hot enough to burn through his shirt. The Hollow-Bellied One answered with a roar that filled his skull with images. Burning towns, crushed tunnels, iron engines feeding on living earth. Above them, Vera screamed. Colton looked back and saw her at the control pillar, fighting the machine she had awakened. Sparks crawled up her arms. Her face had gone pale with understanding. "I can close the engine core," she shouted. "But someone has to stay inside the lock." "Vera, don't!" Colton yelled. For the first time, regret broke through her ambition. "I opened it, Colt." Then she stepped into the engine frame. White light swallowed her. The machine screamed, buckled, and began folding inward. The hollow-bellied one thrashed beneath them. Briar staggered, blood running from her nose. Colton caught her before she fell. "Stay with me," he said. Briar pressed her forehead against his. "Breathe." So he did. He breathed through fear, through shame, through the terrible heat rising from the opened world. Briar's voice deepened. Colton's compass cracked across the center, spilling black sparks into the air. The chamber shook so violently that stone tore free from the ceiling. But the creature below began to slow. One breath, then another. Then silence. The hollow-bellied one sank back into sleep. The blue-white light died, far above. The Ironrail drill line collapsed with a distant roar. Swallowed by the canyon it had tried to conquer. In the sudden darkness, Colton remained kneeling beside Briar, his hands still locked around hers. He was alive, she was alive. But when the quiet returned, Colton could still hear something under the stone, a heartbeat, slow, ancient, endless. Briar opened her eyes and saw his face. "You hear it now," she whispered. Colton nodded, unable to lie. The bond had saved the hidden world, and it had marked him forever. Dawn came slowly to Marrow Gulch, as if even the sun was afraid to look at what the night had done. At first, there was only grey light spilling over the canyon rim, soft and cold, touching the broken rail bridges, the collapsed drill carts, and the long black wound where the Ironrail engine line had been swallowed into the earth. Smoke rose from cracks in the stone. Dust floated through the air like funeral ash. Somewhere below, loose chains clinked in the morning wind, and every sound felt too small after the roar of the hollow-bellied one. Colton Mercer stood at the edge of the ruined upper tunnel, one hand pressed against the wall to keep himself steady. The stone was quiet now, but not silent. Far beneath his boots, deeper than water, deeper than roots, deeper than any map he had ever drawn. He could still feel it, a heartbeat, slow, ancient, endless. It did not speak his name anymore, but it knew him. That was somehow worse. It rested beneath Marrow Gulch like a sleeping mountain with lungs, and some part of Colton's soul now rested with it. Behind him, the hidden orc settlement was alive, though wounded. Bridges had cracked. Lanterns had shattered. The fungus gardens were dusted with fallen stone. Orc families moved through the damage in quiet lines, carrying injured elders, gathering frightened children, pulling survivors from smoke-filled side passages. No one sang. No one laughed. Even the smallest children seemed to understand that a home could survive and still be changed forever. Briar Ashbell sat on a fallen pillar near the water channel, her green skin pale beneath streaks of soot, her hair tangled around her shoulders, one tusk chipped at the edge. A healer had wrapped cloth beneath her nose, where blood had dried during the ritual. She looked exhausted enough to fall asleep sitting up, but when Colton came near, her golden eyes sharpened. "If you say anything foolish," she warned, "I will push you into the water." Colton lowered himself beside her with a painful breath. His ribs ached. His hands were burned where the compass had cracked. His coat was torn almost in half. "I was going to say thank you." Briar looked away. "That is foolish." "I thought so." For a moment they sat without speaking. Water trickled through the repaired channels, brighter than it had seemed before. The sound moved through the broken cavern with strange tenderness. It ran past the feast stones, beneath the hanging bone charms, and into the lower pipes that Colton had helped fix before everything had fallen apart. That water would not belong only to the orcs now. By Mabel's order, a narrow channel had been opened toward Mercy Junction. Not enough to make humans rich, enough to keep children alive. That was the first peace offering, a small one, a dangerous one, but real, across the cavern. Mabel Ashbell lay on a stretcher of woven hide, barking orders at warriors twice her size despite the bandages wrapped around her ribs. Her grey braid had been tied again, though badly, and one of her eyes was swollen nearly shut. She looked less like a wounded elder and more like a mountain that had briefly agreed to lie down. When Colton approached her, she lifted one finger. "If you apologize too long," she said, I will sleep through it, Colton stopped. I did not know Vera was using me. No, Mabel said. But not knowing does not unbreak a door. The words landed heavily because they were true. Colton looked toward the ruined tunnel, where Vera Pike had vanished into white light. Nothing remained of the engine core now, except blackened metal, twisted like dead vines. Vera had not been kind. She had not been innocent. She had helped bring the Empire to the Ashbell home. But in the end, she had stepped into the lock and closed what she opened. Colton did not know whether that made her redeemed. Maybe some debts were too large to be paid. Even with a life, Mabel watched his face and sighed. Carry the lesson, human, not the whole corpse. Outside, the first humans from Mercy Junction arrived by noon. They came cautiously, following the freshwater path through the canyon with empty barrels, rifles, and fear in their eyes. When they saw orcs standing in the open daylight, many raised their weapons. Orc warriors raised spears in return. For one terrible moment after everything, Colton thought the world might choose stupidity again. Then a little human girl stepped forward with a tin cup, an orc child. The same boy Colton had saved from the tunnel collapse, filled it from the new channel. The girl drank. No one fired. The wind moved through the canyon, carrying the smell of wet stone, where there had only been dust for years. Peace did not arrive like a song. It arrived like two frightened children sharing water while adults remembered how to breathe. In the days that followed, Colton learned that saving a hidden world did not make him trusted in either one. Some humans called him orc-touched. Some orcs called him empire bait. Mercy Junction wanted the water, but not the truth of where it came from. The Ashbell clan accepted his help, but watched his hands whenever he unfolded a map. He could not blame them, so he stayed between places. He marked safe tunnels, but refused to draw the sacred ones. He taught human workers where to open pipes without entering orc chambers. He helped rebuild bridges underground, then slept above under the stars when the heartbeat beneath the stone became too loud. Briar often found him there. She never announced herself. She simply appeared at the ridge like a green shadow in daylight, carrying 2 cups of bitterroot tea and the expression of someone doing charity against her will. You look terrible, she said one evening. You say that every day. You look terrible. Every day. He accepted the cup. Your kindness will overwhelm me. She sat beside him on the ridge, overlooking Marrow Gulch. Below them, orc lanterns glowed inside cliff openings, while human water wheels turned slowly near the canyon floor. The broken rail bridge still arched across the gulch, but now strips of colored cloth had been tied to it by orc children and human children both. They snapped in the evening wind like small, stubborn flags. The sky burned gold. Then pink, then deep violet. For a while neither spoke. Then Briar said, "The bond is not finished." Colton nearly choked on his tea. "I was afraid you would say something like that." Her mouth twitched. "A chosen one must answer." "I did answer. I accepted. In your language." She looked at him sideways. "Not mine." Colton stared at her. Behind them, Mabel's voice called from a nearby stone chair where she had been pretending not to listen. "Do not worry, human. Most males survive the answering." Colton went pale. Briar finally laughed, not cruelly, not loudly, just enough that the canyon seemed warmer for it. Far below, deep beneath stone and water and memory, the Hollow-Bellied One released one slow, sleeping breath. Dust shimmered off the canyon walls in the sunset light, turning the air golden around them. Colton did not know if what bound him to Briar would become love, duty, trouble, or all three. He only knew that when the ancient heartbeat rose beneath his feet, he no longer heard it alone, and beside him, Briar Ashbell did not move away. Viewer question: if you were Colton, would you stay beside Briar and accept a strange bond that changed your life forever? Or would you return to the human world and leave the hidden orc kingdom behind?